Hey guys, welcome back. Today's going to be another ultimate discussion video because apparently a lot of you seem to enjoy them, not that I'm complaining. So far I went through Global Ultimates, Super Ultimates, and I guess to a lesser extent Executes, which brings me to the next installment where we're going to be discussing Steroid Ultimates in League of Legends. Sorry by the way for the inconsistency in thumbnail design, Jake and I are trying something new. Despite the ever-growing complexity of new champions' abilities, especially in their ultimates, a common sight for many of the roster's ace in the holes is one that entails a temporary yet substantial boost in combat pressure that comes in different forms. While perhaps not as flashy in outward effect like supers or far-reaching as globals, steroids can exert just as much pressure, if not more, than any other type of ultimate if used at the right time, in the right place, and against the right people. Given the onus being placed on the player, it presents an interesting form of skill expression where you can get either a lot of value from one use of it or nothing at all. So let's find out what steroid ultimates are all about because there are quite a lot of them. Really quickly though, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor for today, Buff. You've seen it plenty of times before on my channel and it's great to be working with them again. For the uninitiated, Buff is a rewards program that hooks you up with real life items simply by playing the game. When you open the app, you start racking up buff points by playing any number of titles from League to Valorant, Fortnite, Dota 2, PUBG, and recently they also added Halo Infinite and Minecraft, namely the Hypixel server. Once you rack up enough points, you can trade them in for gift cards, in-game currency, or even physical goods like gaming hardware, peripherals, and whatnot. Just a reminder that Buff is not a way to make money, rather a way to help you get free skins and whatnot without having to pay money yourself. That being said, they actually have a new debit card issued by Visa, so whenever you use it on gas or groceries like any other card, you can rack up points that way as well. You can learn more about the program on mybuffpay.com if you're interested, and it's US only. Very easy app, all you have to do is download it via Overwolf, which I'm sure most of you have already, and play as usual. Nothing else but do what you're already doing. So if you want to get your hands on the new High Noon skins for instance, then use my tracking link on screen which is also in the description below. Thanks again to Buff for sponsoring the video, but for now let's get back into it. In the context of League, a steroid ability denotes anything that temporarily increases one's performance without tangentially altering it in the long term. Usually self-applied and has a very easy activation. More specifically, it's an ability that provides an increase to a champion's base stats or part of the ability that does so. In general, the only way for you to get stronger is through leveling up and purchasing items. A very select few might have a way to increase their parameters over time such as Scion or Veigar, but for the rest of the cast that's all they have to work with. Steroids are some of the most common ways to artificially inflate your pressure to give you a combat advantage over your opponent. Essentially, if you have anything that grants a higher effective stat line than your opponent in a way that isn't permanent, then it counts as a steroid type ability. Even shields and healing technically fit into this category as you're pretty much gaining bonus health, albeit not explicitly in the form of max health. It doesn't necessarily have to be raw stats either. You could argue something like Master Yi's meditation qualifies as a steroid in light of it providing damage reduction while channeling, which is a form of defense. Though the ones that come to mind for most people are buffs. Draven's Blood Rush, for example, grants him a surge of attack and movement speed for a few seconds. Trundle's Frozen Domain provides a similar combination of stats along with extra healing, and Irelia's Ionian Fervor is a steroid as well, even though it's on her passive. So then what's the difference between a steroid ability and a steroid ultimate? Aside from increasing his stats on a greater scale, the latter also comes with an additional effect of sorts, sometimes doubling as a damage tool or providing a different kind of buff that may not exist anywhere else. First group is the raid bosses. I like to call it that since their steroids not only make them stronger but bigger in a literal sense. That would be Renekton, Nasus, Volibear, Shyvana, and Dr. Mundo. Very straightforward, you press the button and gain some form of health related advantage. Renekton's Dominus grants bonus health, Nasus gains bonus health, armor, and magic resist, Volibear gains health, Shyvana gains health, Dr. Mundo gains a portion of his missing health as max health and bonus attack damage, stuff like that. I suppose a subsection of that would comprise things like Tryndamere's Undying Rage, Jax's Grandmaster's Might, Twitch's Spray and Pray, Alistar's Unbreakable Will, and so on. The second group is, I guess you can call them the gimmicks, any steroid type ability that provides you enhanced combat pressure usually through something other than stats. That would be things like Zillion's Chrono Shift, Olaf's Ragnarok, Kael's Divine Judgment, Aatrox's World Ender, Swain's Demonic Ascension, Vayne's Final Hour, Riven's Blade of the Exile, Master Yi's Highlander, Zeri's Lightning Crash, and so on. Skill expression is a little more prevalent in this category since theirs is far more situational or doesn't provide a tangible advantage in raw force. Even though Olaf gains a massive boost in attack damage or Zeri gets bonus attack speed, each of their ultimates has a condition that, if met, rewards the player even further. Or the primary focus is not on the stat boost but whatever the other effect is, such as the case for Riven's, which grants a more effective range and bonus AD, but Wind Slash is the main focal point of the ability. Several steroid ults are also able to extend their duration. Zeri and Olaf can maintain their state indefinitely so long as they're attacking an enemy champion, while Master Yi, Aatrox, and Vayne's refresh on takedown. Traditionally, any steroid ultimate with the ability to refresh or extend tends to have a low base duration to force players to act fast and make their shots count. The line between what is and isn't part of this group is arguably the least defined out of any category, seeing as they overlap with a lot of others. If you're splitting hairs, you can make a case for Rengar's Thrill of the Hunt being a steroid ultimate since it matches all criteria. You can even say Yasuo's Last Breath is a steroid due to the armor penetration buff he gets afterwards. Fiora's Grand Challenge, Yorick's Eulogy of the Isles, Trundle's Subjugation, Mordekaiser's Death Realm, it gets rather complicated. By now you're probably wondering why the video's title suggests steroid ultimates are boring. With the recent addition of bel'veth, we now have another champion with a steroid ultimate, and a pretty crazy one at that. I think we're starting to get to a point where we're just seeing one too many. But the question is why? Is it Riot simply being too lazy to think of something else, or is it their way of trying to play it safe? So in my Super Ultimates video, I talked about how a fatal weakness and design challenge with those kinds of champions is that their ultimates are too strong to the point where it disproportionately skews their power budget and forces their basic abilities to be much weaker or underwhelming than those without supers. Steroid ultimates are very powerful in nature, but they're obviously not win buttons. For the majority of them, all you get is a massive amount of stats, which is good, but you gotta make use of it. It's not like Malphite's ultimate where all you have to do is press a button and hope you hit as many members of the enemy team as possible. In a way, it's definitely a conservative way to design a champion's strongest ability. But as you know, there are a lot of really stupid steroid ultimates, so what gives? To answer that, we have to go back in time a bit. Many of the original 40 champions in League had steroid-type ultimates because there were many more stat checkers at the time, a lot more point-and-click attacks, and a lot more straightforward abilities. Combat was about whichever player carried a bigger stick or attacked first, as opposed to now where the game places a bigger emphasis on mechanical execution. If we sort by release date and go down the list of champions, you'll notice that as time goes on, the number of champions released with steroid ultimates starts to diminish over time, supplanted by champions who have either playmaking ultimates or more damage dealing stuff, maybe globals, engage, or burst type abilities. By around season 5, steroids drop from 1 in every 3 or 4 champs to 1 in every 10, if that. This period marks a turning point for Riot's design philosophy, where instead of trying to design abilities that let them converge into a theme of sorts known as the bottom-up approach, they begin with the theme and design the rest of their kit afterwards, a top-down approach. You can see it for yourself. A lot of champions pre-2015 have ultimates that you can theoretically rip right out of their kit and it still functions on its own, whereas for post-2015 champs that gets a little harder to do. Aurelion Sol's Voice of Light was not only designed to deal damage but knock enemies toward the outer limit of his stars. Callista's Face Call requires her tethered ally, as do her other abilities. Zaya's Featherstorm sets up the field for Blade Caller, Zoe's Portal Jump can temporarily extend her range for Bubbles and Paddle Stars, Orin's Call of the Forge using its Brittle, so on and so forth. Casting aside personal bias against 200 years champs, as far as playstyle is concerned, newer ones definitely feel more satisfying and enjoyable to play. No one can deny that. Play 10 games of Garen, Annie, or Teemo and most people will get bored pretty quickly. It will take you well over 50 to grow exhausted of any of the new ones. That said, steroids are still present in new champions, but they go about it very differently compared to before. Touching on Zeri again for a moment, Lightning Crash opens with an explosion that deals magic damage to all enemies nearby. If she hits at least one enemy champion, she then activates that steroid, gaining 30% bonus attack speed and the ability for her burst fire to splash onto nearby enemies. Additionally, during this time, she gains 1.5% movement speed per stack of overcharge, which is acquired by damaging enemies with either burst fire crits or charged basic attacks. Doing so also extends the duration by 2 seconds up to the original cap of 6. On a fundamental level, it's not all that different from a typical steroid ultimate like Jax's, but just by comparing the descriptions of both abilities, there's a lot going on with Zeri's by a long shot. And the same holds true for our newest contender, bel'veth, whose ultimate description is so long it barely fits into one screenshot. Like Zeri, Belle's ultimate also leads with an explosion of damage and she gains bonus health, movement speed, attack range, total attack speed, and the minion spawning thingamadoo hickey. Needless to say, we've come a long way since the days of Alistar, Jax, Old Rise and stuff. Empirical data suggests that steroid ultimates veer more on the side of boring, what with how new ones aren't plain stat boosters and come with a lot of different perks. But as you know, Zeri came out extremely overtuned, probably the most overtuned champion in the history of League. It feels almost like Riot is trying to combine steroid ultimates with super ultimates. That begs the question, are steroid ultimates a safer way to design powerful abilities even if it comes at the cost of that wow factor? I like to think it depends on what kind of purpose a champion's ultimate is supposed to fulfill. One benefit of steroid ultimates is that they don't take up a whole lot of your power budget, leaving room for you to work on the rest of your stuff a lot more. Let's examine Renekton for a moment. The hallmark of its gameplay is Fury. Each of his basic abilities have their own functions. Q damages all enemies in an area and heals them for each one hit. W is a multi-attack point-and-click stun, and D is a 2-part dash that can shred through armor with the empowered version. Despite his ultimate only providing him with bonus health, a little bit of range, and a magic damage aura, since it juices up his fury while generating more over its duration, Dominus is a very exciting ultimate for Renekton players because it's a dynamic boost in pressure that can come in different forms depending on what empowered ability you use. In that sense, Renekton's Steroid Ultimate is not just flat stats, as each cast of Dominus can have varying impacts in a fight. Another example would be Shyvana's Dragon Ascent, upgrading her abilities on top of the size, health, and range boost she gets. I know it really just boils down to her launching fiery torpedoes at you, but you get what I mean. It changes up how she approaches a situation compared to her base form. Comparatively, you have a steroid like Jack's Grandmaster's Might, which, while powerful, doesn't change up his game plan in any way. It only enables him to keep doing what he's already been doing. The same goes for steroids like Highlander or World Ender. There is a degree of skill expression in that you need the game sense to know when to use it and whether it's worth using it, but the effect itself doesn't change up your game plan in any way. Master Yi is still gonna mash right click on anyone in range and press Q when he needs to, while Aatrox's Q will do more damage and heal him for a lot more. Going by that definition, Steroid Ultimates can be seen as boring since nothing tangibly changes about the champion's experience, they just get stronger temporarily. I'm sure that all of us can agree that Lee Sin's ult has a lot more potential for crazy outplays than Olaf. However, it is somewhat easier to keep those kinds of abilities in check. It's stats. If Nasus feels way too tanky without needing to build many tank items, then the obvious move is to lower the armor and magic resist or health on his ultimate. The range of consequences is not as wide. Therefore, in theory anyway, it's inherently less likely to become a balance nightmare. All the same, Steroid Ultimates are appearing less frequently as of late, and the few that do show up are way more multidimensional than their predecessors. For good reason too. Stat checkers are not good for the game because there isn't much satisfaction that comes from playing them, and certainly not playing against them. If you were to design a champion with one, it should be done so in the same way as they did for Renekton or Shyvana, where instead of giving a mountain of stats, it should either enhance or alter the effects of their basic abilities. Of course, doing so is a lot easier said than done, since that in and of itself runs the risk of overloading a champion. But let's flip things around for a moment. At the start of the video, I explained how steroids require the player to make use of it, which implies there can be fluctuating results. That would contradict what I said earlier about how steroid ultimates don't have a very wide range of consequences, right? Perhaps. Attack-based ultimates are also fixed in nature, like, once again, Lee Sin's Dragon Rage is mostly just damage and displacement, and though it does present opportunities for him to secure his team the fight, at the end of the day, it's damage and displacement, so the blade cuts both ways. Even the majority of super ultimates have finite value. Malphite's ultimate is one of the best individual abilities in the game, but what you see is what you get. There's no ambiguity in what it's capable of. That's the one disadvantage steroid ults have over their peers. It's hard to gauge to what extent the increase in stats will influence the champion's power ceiling. Look at bel'veth. Endless Banquet may only give her bonus health, attack speed, and range, but just how much does it change the rest of her kit? That's the hard part. For all we know, lowering her bonus health scaling might do nothing to change her balance. The very existence of her ultimate could be the problem and not any singular component. Context, as always, matters most in determining how well designed an ability is. With that in mind, I still think there is room for further exploration in this field. If there's one thing Steroid Ultimates accomplish, it's that they establish a very clear difference in how threatening a champion is with or without them. I mean, technically that applies to any ultimate, but practically speaking, the contrast between a Master Yi with Highlander and without is easy to notice, or the difference between an Aatrox and World Ender and Aatrox without, because at its core, steroids are unconditional enhancements to your combat pressure at the start, and they don't have anything in particular that outright shuts down any form of counterplay. Which is why I think, despite the lack of creativity in some of them, I would much rather deal with a steroid ultimate like Nasus or Volibear than something like Zed's Deathmark or Kane's Umbral Trespass. At the very least, for the former two, the only thing their ults do is make them stronger. Zed and Kane have Untarget Ability, which entails a lot more potential BS that screws over many champions with no chance of counterplay. So what do you guys think? Do you believe steroids are lazy ways to design ultimates, or do you enjoy them? As someone who avidly plays steroid ultimate champs, I have a personal bias of them, but I see how they can get a little monotonous at times. On that note, out of all the steroid ultimates in the game, which one do you think is best designed and which one do you think is the worst? Feel free to share in the comments down below. Apart from that, if you enjoyed the video, it would be awesome if you could leave a like and subscribe. Consider following me on Twitter, joining my Discord server, and checking out my discussion episodes on Global and Super Ultimates if you haven't yet. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.